My mother-in-law said, "Freeze and learn gratitude," and kicked me barefoot outside in the winter. She warned the neighbors to ignore my screams as I stood in the snow and wiped my feet through my socks until they bled. My husband watched from the window and laughed. And then a video of what happened went viral online. 23 degrees of frost. I know this because I heard the weather forecast this morning. 23 degrees, and I'm standing barefoot in the snow. For the first 10 seconds, there was no pain, just scalding cold and shock. Then came the burning, so intense it felt like my feet were being poured boiling water on them. After a minute, my feet started to go numb. I thought that was a good sign, the pain was going away. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered that numbness is the beginning of frostbite. Freeze and learn gratitude, these words Virginia said, with the same intonation with which she usually said bon appetit at dinner. My mother-in-law stood on the porch of her immaculate two-story house, arms crossed over her chest. She was wearing a warm caramel-colored cashmere coat, her neck wrapped in a gray scarf. She didn't scream. She never screamed. Even when she grabbed me by the hair 15 minutes ago and pushed me out the back door, she did it with frightening calm. "Please, Virginia." My voice shook, my teeth chattering. "I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you. Please let me in." "Apologies are worthless, Abigail," she said my full name like she always did when she was particularly displeased. "You need to understand what ingratitude means." I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. The thin cotton socks, the only thing I had on, were already soaked through. Snow clogged between my toes. I looked up at the second-story window where Josh was standing. My husband was watching with a glass of whiskey in one hand and his phone in the other. He was filming. Oh my God, he was making a video. "Josh!" I screamed. "Josh, please! Help me!" He just smiled and raised his glass as if making a toast. I saw the movement through the veil of tears that were freezing on my cheeks. I looked around. The neighbor's house is on the right. The Mitchells live there. They should be able to hear me. "Help! Somebody! Help me!" I screamed with all my might. The curtain on the first floor of the Mitchell house twitched, but then closed tightly. The windows across the street did the same thing. "Don't bother," Virginia said. "I warned the neighbors you might throw a tantrum, said you were having a nervous breakdown, and Josh and I were having a therapeutic intervention. They're understanding people. No one would interfere in a family matter." I stopped yelling. It's no use. I looked at my feet. My socks, white in the morning, were now a dirty gray color from melted snow and earth. How long had I been standing here? 10 minutes? 15? What have I done? I asked quietly, no longer expecting an answer. "For what?" "You know why." Virginia pressed her lips together. "And my son knows too. Now stand there and think about your behavior. When you decide to behave like a proper wife and daughter-in-law, you may knock." With these words, she turned and went into the house, closing the door tightly behind her. I was alone in the yard. The snow continued to fall in large flakes, settling on my hair and shoulders. I was wearing only a homemade sweater and jeans. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to keep warm. I stopped feeling my toes. At some point, I stopped crying. It was too cold for tears. The feeling of humiliation was stronger than the cold. I, a 32-year-old woman, stand like a naughty girl in a corner. Only instead of a corner, it's snowing, and the punishment is administered not by a teacher, but by a woman I should call mother. I think it had been about 20 minutes when I noticed my socks were getting sticky. Leaning over, I was horrified to see dark stains. Blood. I'd rubbed my feet so hard trying to keep my balance on the uneven surface that the skin had rubbed off to the point of bleeding. I looked at the window again. Josh was still standing there, but now Virginia was with him. They were discussing something, looking at me. Occasionally, Josh would show her his phone screen, and they would both laugh. At that moment, something snapped inside of me. It was as if the last thread connecting me to that house, to those people, had broken. I couldn't go back there anymore. I couldn't knock on that door. I couldn't sleep in the same bed with a man who laughed at my humiliation. I took a step, then another. Every movement was painful. I didn't know where I was going. Just away from this house. Abby! Abby, over here! I turned around and saw Helen Diaz, our neighbor on the left. She was standing at the gate of her house, waving frantically at me. Hurry, before they see! Gathering the last of my strength, I wandered toward her. Helen, a woman in her 50s with short dark hair, ran up to me, threw her coat over my shoulders, and helped me to her house. My God, you're freezing! She exclaimed as she closed the door behind us. What have they done to you? It's abuse! I couldn't speak. My lips wouldn't listen. Helen helped me to a chair in her kitchen and dipped my feet into a basin of warm, not hot, water. I cried out in pain. I know it hurts, she said, but you have to warm them up gradually. If you use hot water all at once, it'll be worse. She gave me a cup of hot tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and gently pulled off my wet socks. I hissed in pain. I'm sorry, Helen mumbled. They're stuck to the wounds. I need to soak them. As Helen worked on my feet, I slowly came to my senses. The feeling in my fingers was returning, and with it came excruciating pain. How long were you standing there? Helen asked. I don't know. Maybe half an hour. My voice sounded alien, hoarse. Half an hour? In this cold? Helen shook her head. You could have gotten serious frostbite. Your mother-in-law. She told all the neighbors you were having a nervous breakdown and told them not to interfere. But when I saw from the window what was going on, she stopped talking, her eyes downcast. Thank you, I said. If it hadn't been for you. Don't thank me, she cut me off. I'm ashamed I didn't come out sooner. It's just, Virginia's so persuasive. She said you and your husband had a fight. You threatened him, and now you needed space for therapeutic conflict resolution. I grinned bitterly. Virginia always had a knack for presenting things in a favorable light. Abby? Helen hesitated. There's something else. You need to know. Josh. He posted the video online to a local neighborhood group, captioned it, Therapy for a Hysterical Wife. I froze. Everything inside me just snapped. What? Helen silently handed me her phone. On the screen was a video of me, standing in the snow, begging to be let in. Josh had gotten a close-up shot of my feet in the snow, my crying face. There were already dozens of comments under the video. Some wrote that it was horrible, but most were supportive of Josh. Women need to be shown their place sometimes. If you got a man down, get one. Good shake for a hysterical woman. The world went upside down. I didn't just lose my home, my family, and my dignity. My humiliation was now a public spectacle, entertainment for strangers. I couldn't finish the sentence. I didn't know what I needed, where to go, what to do. You need to go to the hospital, Helen said firmly. You've got serious skin damage on your legs, and you need to document it. And then we'll decide what to do next. I nodded, feeling no relief. There was an emptiness inside, and a feeling that my life was over. Or rather, the life I had known up to this point. There was no going back anymore. Lying on the couch in the emergency room, I thought back to the day I first saw Josh, 5 years ago. A corporate Christmas party for Innovate Marketing, where I worked as an office manager. I was standing by the drinks table, alone, feeling out of place at these events as usual. You seem to be as bored as I am, said a low male voice. I turned around and saw him, tall, with dark blonde hair, and a confident smile. Joshua Coleman, the new director of digital marketing that had been the talk of the office. I wouldn't say I'm bored, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I really was. Just observing people. And what are you observing, Abby? He already knew my name, even though we hadn't been introduced. How did you know my name? I asked about you. He looked me straight in the eye. It was hard not to notice the most beautiful woman in the company. I blushed and looked away. At 27, I still didn't know how to take compliments, especially from men like Josh. He wasn't just attractive, he had the confidence of a man who knew what he wanted and was used to getting it. What would a man like that see in me? Average height, brown hair, nothing outstanding. A regular Abby Lewis who'd spent her life trying not to stand out. My parents, Richard and Carol Lewis, were ambitious people. My father was a surgeon, my mother a lawyer. They expected me to follow in their footsteps, go to a prestigious university, go into a serious profession. But I was always an average student. I went to a regular college, got a degree in communications, and got a job in administration. It wasn't enough for them. "You can do more, Abigail," my mother said every time I came over for dinner. "With your abilities, being a secretary is a waste of life." "I'm an office manager, Mom. And I like my job." "Office manager, secretary, what's the difference?" She waved it off. "Anyone can serve coffee and answer the phone." Dad was usually silent, but his silence was more eloquent than words. I could feel his frustration. As a child, he had often said, "Lewises are never mediocre." Apparently, I was the exception to the rule. Not surprisingly, my relationships with men didn't work out so well. 2 serious romances ended before they started. The first guy, Nate, dumped me for my girlfriend, saying I was too bland. The second guy, Alex, just disappeared after 6 months. He stopped returning my calls, deleted me from social media. It took me a long time to figure out what I'd done wrong. And then, at that Christmas party, Josh showed up. He stayed with me the whole night. He asked about my interests, listened to my humble stories as if they were exciting adventures. At the end of the evening, he asked for my phone number. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "I want to take you on a real date. You deserve better than talking around a table of appetizers." The next day, he did call. A week later, he sent a huge bouquet of roses to work. My coworkers gasped and asked who my secret admirer was. When they found out it was Josh Coleman, there was a look of surprise in their eyes. "He picked you?" I could see it in their gazes. I myself didn't understand why. But Josh didn't let me question my choice. He showered me with attention. He took me to expensive restaurants, gave me gifts, sent me sweet texts in the middle of the day. "You're special, Abby," he said. "Others don't see it because you don't let yourself shine." But I do. 6 months later, he proposed to me. My parents were thrilled. Their daughter had finally done something right. Married a successful, promising man. It was a small wedding. Josh insisted on it. "Why do we need a crowd of people?" he said. "Let's make this day just for us." I agreed. I didn't have a lot of friends, and after Josh and I started dating, my circle had narrowed even more. He didn't like my girlfriends, deemed them too frivolous or bad influences. One by one, they disappeared from my life. At the wedding, I first met his mother, Virginia Coleman, a tall, slender woman with impeccable hair and an icy stare. She smiled, hugged me, said the right words, but I could feel the coldness in her every gesture. "Joshua's finally settling down," she said during the welcome toast. "I hope you make him happy, Abigail. He deserves only the best." It wasn't unusual, but the way she said it made me cringe. It was as if she doubted that I was the best. After we got married, we moved to a house near Virginia City. Josh attributed it to taking care of his mother. "She's lonely after her father died," he said. "And besides, she can teach you a lot. She's a great hostess." Virginia did teach me a lot of things. How to fold Josh's shirts properly. What his favorite dishes were when he was a kid. What an immaculate home should look like. "Joshua was used to cleanliness and order," she said, running her finger along a shelf and defiantly shaking off the dust. "In our house, you could always eat off the floor." I tried. I tried very hard to conform. Getting up at 5 in the morning to make Josh breakfast. I cleaned the house to a high standard. I watched my weight and my appearance, and it still wasn't enough. "Abby, that blouse doesn't suit you at all," Josh might have said over breakfast. "It makes you look bigger. Wear something more appropriate." I silently changed. He's right, I thought. He means well. He wants me to look better. And then the questions about money started. "Why do you need your own credit card?" Josh asked when I brought it up. We share a budget. I'm great with finances. Just tell me what you need, and I'll provide it. That seemed reasonable to me. Josh was actually better with money. I was never good with finances. Gradually, I stopped working. The official reason was that Josh was offered a promotion in another city. We moved, and he suggested I take a break. Until we get settled in. You need time to make our house cozy, he said. And then, if you want to, you can find something suitable. That right never came. Every time I talked about going back to work, there was a reason to put it off. Josh didn't think the company was prestigious enough, or the salary didn't match my potential, or the office was too far from home. In the end, I found myself completely dependent on Josh. No job, no money of my own, no friends. Just the house, Josh, and his mother, who came at least 3 times a week to see how I was doing as her son's wife. Joshua looks tired, she said. Are you watching his regimen? He always works better if he gets enough sleep. Or, is that a new dress? It looks expensive. Joshua works so hard to provide for you. You have to be more frugal, honey. I tried to object. I tried for the first year of marriage, but every objection was met with such coldness and disapproval that I gradually learned to keep quiet. Josh was changing. No, he wasn't. Josh hadn't changed. He'd just stopped hiding his true nature. He'd always been controlling, demanding. It's just that at the beginning of the relationship, he'd masked it with care and attention. Now his moods could change in a second. He was gentle in the morning and icy and detached in the evening. He could criticize me for everything, the way I spoke, the way I walked, the way I breathed. Literally. You breathe so loud when you sleep, he said one night, waking me with a sharp jolt. Go to the guest bedroom. I can't rest like this. I cried, locking myself in the bathroom. But the next morning, I apologized for disturbing his sleep, and I promised to make it up to him. I always promised to get better, to be better, to live up to his expectations. I believed that I was the problem, that if I was good enough, Josh would go back to being the caring man I fell in love with. Virginia was his staunchest ally. She never criticized her son. She always found excuses for his behavior, and always found fault with me. Men are such demanding creatures, she said with fake sympathy. They need special care, especially exceptional men like my Joshua. You should try harder, Abigail. He's chosen you from so many women. You have to prove yourself worthy of his choice. And I have. Year after year, I tried to be the perfect wife. I lost myself, my interests, my dreams. I became a shadow, existing only to fulfill Josh's needs and meet his mother's standards. But even the shadow sometimes rises. 3 days ago, at Virginia's traditional Sunday lunch, something in me broke. Perhaps it was fatigue from 5 years of constant strain. Perhaps the last straw was another criticism of me. We sat at a perfectly set table. Virginia served her signature roast, which Josh praised to the heavens. I could learn from you, Abby, he said as he put another bite in his mouth. Your roast is always dry. That's because it doesn't add love, Virginia said. Food made without love is always tasteless. I felt something inside me boil up. Maybe it's not the love, but the fact that you can always find something to complain about. The words came out before I could think. There was silence at the table. Josh slowly put down his fork. What did you say? His voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. Yeah, I think Abigail's implying that you and I are being too critical, son. Virginia blotted her lips with a napkin. That we don't appreciate her effort. That's not what I meant. I tried to justify myself. It's just that sometimes it seems that no matter what I do, whatever you're doing isn't good enough? Josh finished for me. Is that what you were going to say? I didn't say anything. I knew that tone. Knew that any answer I gave would be wrong. Well, Virginia stood up from the table. I think Joshua and I need to talk alone. Abigail, would you mind clearing the table? They went into the study. I could hear their muffled voices, but I couldn't make out their words. When they returned, the atmosphere had changed. They were both smiling, but there was something sinister in their smiles. "Abby, honey," Josh said almost gently, "Mom suggested a great idea. I think you should stay with her for a couple days. To, refresh your housekeeping skills. What do you say?" I was gonna say no. I wanted to say it was absurd, but years of obedience did the trick. I agreed. The next 2 days at Virginia's house were hell. She hounded me like a servant, forcing me to rewash dishes that were already clean, redo laundry that was already perfectly ironed. Nothing was good enough. And Josh would come over in the evenings and listen to my mother's reports on my progress. And then came the third day, the day Virginia decided to teach me a lesson in gratitude by putting me out barefoot in the cold. At the hospital, I had my feet treated, bandages applied, and a prescription for pain medication. The doctor in the emergency room, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, had seen a lot of things, but still shook her head as she looked at my injuries. "How did you say it happened?" she asked, making notes on a clipboard. I looked at Helen. She nodded faintly, encouraging me. "I was put out barefoot in the snow," I said. "My husband and his mother. They made me stand there for half an hour until my feet bled." The doctor looked up from her clipboard. There was no judgment in her gaze, only professional sympathy. "I'm obliged to record this as a case of domestic violence," she said. "Do you want to file a police report?" A police report. The words sounded so unreal. The police. Josh and Virginia. Statement. "Yeah. I don't know." My voice shook. "I need to think about it. Sure." She handed me a business card. "Here's the number for social services. They can help in situations like this. And these pictures and notes will stay in your medical records if you decide to go to law enforcement." Helen drove me back to her house. I limped, leaning on her arm. Every step hurt, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what was going on inside. At Helen's house, I had a hot dinner, a warm bath, and the clean clothes she'd lent me. Her clothes were too big for me. Helen was bigger than me, but that didn't matter now. "You can stay with me as long as you need to," she said. "The guest room is all yours." "Thank you." I didn't know how else to express my gratitude. "You're the only one who's helped me." Helen shrugged. "I just did what any normal person would do. And I'm ashamed I didn't intervene sooner." I struggled up the stairs to the guest room, sat down on the bed, wrapping my arms around myself. The reality of what was happening was still boggling my mind. I'm homeless. I'd left my husband. My humiliation captured on video, seen by hundreds of people. My phone, which Helen had taken from my bag while I was in the bathroom, was on the nightstand. I picked it up, unlocked the screen. 20 missed calls from Josh. 32 messages. I opened the first one. "Where are you? Get back here now." The second. "Abby, you're only making things worse. Mom just wanted to teach you a lesson. You're being dramatic." And on it goes. Accusations, demands, not one apology. The last message was different. "You're making us look like monsters. The video's already on the local news. Do you realize what you're doing? You're ruining my reputation. Either you come back and we fix this together, or you're going to regret it." I turned my phone off. I was shaking. Josh was threatening me. Josh, who only a few years ago had sworn eternal love and protection. The next morning, Helen brought me breakfast in bed. Toast, scrambled eggs, orange juice. She put her clipboard next to the tray. "You need to know what's going on," she said in an apologetic tone. "Better be prepared." I picked up the tablet. A page of a local news portal was open on the screen. The headline of the article read, "Family Drama or Domestic Violence. Shocking Video Has Divided the Community." The article included comments from neighbors, family psychology experts, and of course, Josh and Virginia. Josh looked haggard but collected in the photo accompanying his quote, "My wife suffers from emotional instability. My mother and I have tried to help her, but the situation is out of control. What looks like abuse in the video was part of a therapeutic exercise recommended by a specialist. Unfortunately, Abby refuses professional help. Virginia added, "We love Abigail and want only the best for her." It is unfortunate that a private family situation has become a matter of public discussion. As I read their words, I was overcome with a mixture of rage and helplessness. They were turning everything upside down. They were making me look crazy and themselves look like caring saviors. And people believed them. The comments under the article were mostly on their side. It's fashionable to accuse husbands of all sins. Maybe she does need treatment. Not everything is so clear-cut. If you'd seen my sister-in-law, I'd have taught her worse. I set the clipboard aside, feeling nauseous. Helen sat down next to me on the bed. "Don't read the comments," she said. "Don't ever read the comments. People judge what they don't know. But they believe them. Why do they believe them? Because the Colemans are a respected family in our town. Virginia chairs 3 charitable committees. Josh sponsors the local soccer team. And you? I'm nobody. I finished for her. Just Josh Coleman's wife." "That's not what I meant." Helen squeezed my hand gently. "But yes, they have more influence, more connections." Over the next 3 days, the situation only got worse. The video spread outside our city. It was picked up by major media platforms, discussed on talk shows. Josh and Virginia did a few more interviews, further reinforcing my instability. Colleagues from my old job, who had initially expressed support, gradually fell silent. No one wanted to get involved with the troubled Coleman family. Even the few friends I had left kept their distance. Cindy, with whom we had worked together before my marriage, wrote, "Abby, I'm sorry, but my husband thinks it's best if we don't communicate right now. It could hurt his career. You understand, right?" I understood. In a small town, reputation is everything, and my reputation was destroyed. On the 5th day of my stay at Helen's, as I sat in the living room, staring at the TV, but not taking in anything that was on, the doorbell rang. Helen opened it. I heard a man's voice, then her concerned reply. "She doesn't want to talk to anyone." "What's going on?" I asked when she came back into the living room. "There's a reporter from the Daily Chronicle. He wants to interview you." "Tell him that." I was interrupted. This time it was my cell phone, an unknown number. I hesitated, but then I decided to answer it. "Abigail Coleman?" A woman's voice, confident, businesslike. "Yes, that's me. My name is Morgan Reed. I'm an attorney specializing in domestic violence cases. I've seen the video and subsequent interviews of your husband and mother-in-law. I think you might need some legal help." I didn't know what to say. Legal help. That sounded so, official. So final. "I'm not sure I can afford a lawyer," I said finally. "Don't worry about that," she said, a warmer note in her voice. "I work with an organization that provides free legal assistance to victims of domestic violence. If you're willing, I'd like to meet with you to discuss your options." My options. "I have options?" "Yes," I said after a pause. "I'm willing to meet." We arranged to meet at her office the next day. Helen agreed to drive me. Morgan's office was in the downtown business district, a modern glass-walled building. Morgan herself was a woman in her mid-40s, wearing a strict suit, with a short haircut and a penetrating gaze. "Thank you for seeing me, Abigail." She shook my hand. "Have a seat, please. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, water?" "Water, please." She poured water from the carafe on the table and handed me a glass. Her movements were confident, but not abrupt. "Before we begin, I want to assure you that everything you say here will remain confidential. You may speak freely." I nodded, not sure where to begin. "You've seen the video, it wasn't a question." "Yes." Morgan nodded. "And I saw the follow-up interviews with your husband and his mother. I got the impression that they're trying to control the narrative by presenting you in a certain light. They say I'm unstable." I clutched my water glass. "That this was some kind of therapeutic exercise." "That's a lie. It's all lies." "I believe you," Morgan said simply. and I want to help you tell your side of the story. But before we get into the legal issues, I want you to understand something. What happened to you was not just an isolated incident of brutality. From what I can see, and I've been handling these cases for 15 years, you were the victim of prolonged emotional and psychological abuse. Her words struck me like lightning. Violence. The word had never crossed my mind in relation to my situation. Josh had never hit me, had never pushed me, didn't do anything that is commonly associated with the word violence. I realize this is hard for you to accept, Morgan continued, seeing my confusion. Most of my clients don't realize they've been abused until someone calls it what it is. Psychological abuse often goes unnoticed because there are no bruises, no broken bones. But it destroys self-esteem, self-confidence, the ability to trust one's own judgment. It isolates the victim, makes them dependent on the aggressor. I listened to her, and every word echoed inside me. She was describing my life, my feelings, my fear. Control of my finances, Morgan continued. Isolation from friends and family, constant criticism, making you question your own adequacy. All of these are forms of abuse. I thought it was just marriage, I said quietly. That all relationships were like that I should be grateful to Josh for choosing me, despite my flaws. That's exactly what he wanted you to believe. Morgan leaned forward. But it's not true. Healthy relationships are based on respect, trust, and equality. What your husband and mother-in-law did to you, putting you out in the cold barefoot, videotaping you, and now trying to paint you as crazy, is the culmination of a long pattern of abuse. I covered my face with my hands and burst into tears. The tears poured and poured as if a dam had burst. All this time, I was a victim of abuse and I didn't know it. I thought I was the problem, that I wasn't good enough, that I should try harder. Morgan gave me time to cry. When I calmed down a little, she continued. You have options, Abigail. You can file for divorce. You can get a restraining order that prevents your husband and mother-in-law from coming near you. You can tell your story publicly, refute their lies, and I'll help you through it all. They're so powerful, I said. They have money, connections. Who would believe me against them? The truth has power. Morgan put the folder in front of me. And we have proof. Video, medical records, your neighbor's testimony. That's more than a lot of women in your situation have. I stared at the folder. In it was my future, my freedom, a chance to reclaim the voice that had been taken from me. What do I have to do? I asked. The first step is to file for a divorce and restraining order. Then we can consider interviewing you with a trusted journalist who will present your story fairly. But first of all, you need to decide if you're ready to do that. It's going to be a tough road. They will resist. They'll try to smear you even more. I thought about Josh, about Virginia, about how they controlled me, manipulated me, destroyed me from the inside out day after day, about how they laughed, watching me from the window as I stood in the snow, humiliated and helpless. And then I thought of myself, the Abby I was before I met Josh. Insecure, yes. Low self-esteem, yes. But with dreams, with hopes, with a sense of self-worth that had been taken from me. I'm ready, I said, raising my eyes to Morgan. I want to file for divorce, and I want to tell my story, the true story. I'm not going to let them turn me into a crazy person who needs to be cured. Morgan smiled. There was understanding in her eyes, the understanding of a woman who had seen many stories like mine, and who knew the courage it took to say enough. Then let's begin. She opened the folder and pulled out the forms. This will be the beginning of your new life, Abigail. A life without fear or humiliation. I took the pen she held out to me. My hand trembled, but my resolve was firm. It was time to reclaim my voice. Filling out the divorce papers turned out to be a surprisingly mundane process. Name, date of birth, date of marriage, address of last residence together, reason for divorce. Morgan recommended putting irreconcilable differences instead of abuse. It would be easier and faster. We'll file a separate application for a restraining order, she explained. We'll include all the details of the incident. I signed the papers, and each signature felt like betrayal and release at the same time. 5 years of marriage turned into a cage that I was now refusing. That same day, Morgan helped me pack up Josh's house. We arrived with the bailiff at a time when Josh was at work. I walked through the rooms I once considered my home and felt nothing but coldness and alienation. I took clothes, a few books, pictures from my youth, jewelry given by my parents. It all fit into 3 suitcases. That was all that was left of my old life. Helen offered to let me stay with her, but Morgan insisted I move to a women's crisis center. Josh knows where Helen lives, she said. And even though we've filed for a restraining order, until the court decides, it's better if he doesn't know where you are. The New Beginning Center was located in a former apartment building on a quiet street in the suburbs. No signage, no directional signs, just an intercom at the entrance and security cameras. Inside, everything was simple but cozy. A common living room with worn but clean couches, a kitchen where the women took turns cooking dinner, and several bedrooms on the second floor. I was assigned a small room that I shared with Rachel, a young woman with a 1-year-old child. She had run away from her husband, who had beaten her after the birth of her son. When I told her my story, she looked at me with an understanding I had not found in anyone before. People don't realize that violence isn't just about bruises, she said as she rocked her son. Sometimes bruises on the soul take longer to heal than on the body. The center offered group therapy sessions 3 times a week. At first, I was afraid to speak. I sat in silence, listening to other women's stories. Some had experienced physical abuse, others psychological abuse, like me. We were all different, but we had one thing in common. We had found the strength to leave. At the 3rd session, I spoke for the first time. I talked about Josh, about Virginia, about how I gradually lost myself, how I accepted guilt, how I justified their behavior. Told about the 30 minutes in the snow that changed everything. When I finished, there was silence in the room. And then Maria, a woman in her 50s with graying hair, came up to me and just hugged me. Others came up behind her. No one said, "It's your own fault," or, "Why did you put up with it for so long?" They understood. They had all been through their standing in the snow, the moment when it becomes impossible to continue living the old way. Our therapist, Diane, helped us sort through our feelings. I learned that the panic that came over me in waves was a normal reaction to trauma, that the guilt was part of the psychological abuse I had endured, that my doubts about my own adequacy were the result of years of gaslighting when Josh and Virginia forced me not to trust my feelings. "You're not broken, Abby," Diana said. "You're wounded, and wounds heal." While I was learning to trust myself anew, Josh and Virginia continued their campaign. They did a few more interviews. Josh portrayed a concerned husband who just wants his wife to get the help she needs. Virginia cried in front of the cameras, telling how she had always treated Abigail like a daughter. Their version of events took a new turn. They now claimed that I suffered from bipolar disorder, refused to take my medication, and had run outside on my own at the time of the episode while they tried to calm me down. These lies pissed me off, but Morgan advised me not to react publicly until we were ready to do our own interview. "They're digging themselves a hole," she said. "The more they talk, the more contradictions appear in their story. And we have video and medical records." One evening, scrolling through social media on an old computer in the center's common room, I came across the profile of my sister, Laura. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Not since she got into an argument with Josh at one of the family dinners. He had then claimed Laura was a bad influence on me, and I, as a dutiful wife, had cut off contact with her. I looked at her picture for a long time. Laura had always been stronger than me, more confident. Josh had never liked her for that very reason. He couldn't control her. Mustering up the courage, I texted her, "Laura, it's Abby." I left Josh. "I don't know if you heard about what happened, but I really need to talk to you." The reply came 5 minutes later. "Thank God! I was just about to hire a private investigator to find you." Where are you? I'll be there. We met the next day at a cafe near the center. Laura hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. I saw that damn video, she said, not letting go of me. I almost lost my mind. I called you. I texted you. I wanted to come, but I didn't know where you were. Josh blocked your calls and texts, I said. He controlled my phone. Laura swore, then took my hands in hers. The important thing is that you left him. I always knew he was a creep, but I didn't realize how much. We talked for hours. I told her everything, not just about the snow incident, but about the years of psychological abuse, how Josh had isolated me from my family and friends, how he'd shattered my self-confidence. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Laura asked, wiping away her tears. I didn't realize what was going on, I answered honestly. I thought I was the problem, that I wasn't a good enough wife. And then I was ashamed to admit that I'd let someone treat me like that. It's not your fault. Laura squeezed my hands. It never was, and it never will be. I'll talk to Mom and Dad. They need to know the truth. The thought of talking to my parents scared me. We didn't talk much as it was, and after Josh and I got married, even less. He always found reasons to cancel family gatherings, and when we did see each other, he played the perfect son-in-law. Caring, successful, loving. But Laura kept her promise. 2 days later, she called. They want to talk to you. I told them what happened. They're on your side, Abby. Talking to my parents was difficult. Mom was crying. Dad was unusually quiet, reserved. They apologized for not noticing, for not intervening, for not saving me. We thought you were doing well, Mom said. Josh seemed so attentive, always saying how much he loved you. He's a good actor, I grinned bitterly. We'll help you, Dad said firmly. Anything, money, a place to live. You're not alone, Abigail. My family's support gave me strength. I started looking for a job, small, temporary, whatever it took to become financially independent. A month after running away from Josh, I found a receptionist position at a small medical center. Nothing outstanding, answering phones, taking notes, scheduling doctors. But it was a huge step for me. The owner of the center was Samantha Griffin, a 45-year-old internist. At the interview, I told her honestly about my situation, that I was in the midst of a divorce, living in a crisis center. I've seen the video, she said simply. And I'm glad you left him. I later learned that Samantha had gone through an abusive relationship herself when she was younger. Perhaps that's why she gave me a chance, despite my 5-year hiatus and lack of references. She became not just my boss, but a mentor, an example of what life after abuse can be like. It's like recovering from a serious illness, she said. Every day you get a little stronger. And then one day you wake up and realize you're free, not just physically, mentally, that his voice in your head no longer controls you. I hadn't felt that freedom yet, but I was beginning to believe that one day I would. 2 months into the divorce proceedings, Morgan offered me an interview, not to some small publication, but to the Chronicle, a respected magazine that specialized in deep, serious stories. The journalist, Marcus Daniels, is known for his investigations into domestic violence, Morgan said. He won't twist your words. He'll give you a chance to tell the truth. I agreed, even though I was afraid. Afraid I wouldn't be able to express myself clearly. That Marcus would see me as the unstable woman that Josh and Virginia thought I was. That people wouldn't believe me. The interview took place in Morgan's office. Marcus was a serious middle-aged man with attentive eyes and a notebook in which he kept jotting things down. He didn't rush me, gave me time to find my words, asked clarifying questions, but never interrupted me. I told him everything from the first time I met Josh to the 30 minutes in the snow. About the years of manipulation, about the gradual isolation, about how I'd been led to believe I didn't deserve better treatment. How did you feel standing there in the snow? Marcus asked. I wondered. Humiliation, I finally said. Humiliation most of all. Not so much the cold or the pain, but the realization that the man who swore to love and protect me was laughing as he watched me suffer. that he was videotaping it as entertainment. In that moment, I realized I could never go back to him. The article came out a week later. Morgan sent me a link with a short message. "You made it." I was reading my story through the eyes of an outsider. Marcus didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. He simply presented the facts, my words, the medical evidence. Next to the text were pictures of my injured legs, documents from the hospital, still images from the video Josh had made. Reaction to the article was mixed, but mostly supportive. Many commenters expressed outrage at Josh and Virginia's behavior. Others shared similar stories. Of course, there were those who continued to believe Josh's version, who accused me of lying and exaggerating. But they were a minority. The most unexpected result of the article was that several neighbors, including the Mitchells, contacted Marcus and confirmed my version of events. It turned out that many had seen what had happened that day, but were afraid to get involved because of the Coleman family's influence in town. 3 days after the article was published, there was a court hearing on the restraining order. I was scared, but determined. Morgan had prepared me for the fact that Josh and Virginia would be in the courtroom, that I would have to testify, that their attorney would try to undermine my case. When I walked into the courtroom, the first thing I saw was Josh's face. He looked both angry and confused, like he couldn't believe that I had actually brought the case to trial. Virginia sat next to him, straight as a string, with an expression of offended dignity. I testified, describing the incident and the pattern of psychological abuse that preceded it. Josh's attorney tried to paint me as unstable, exaggerating, but Morgan skillfully parried his every attack. She presented the court with medical documents, testimony from Helen and other neighbors, and photographs of my injuries. The decisive argument was the very video Josh had made. The judge, an older woman with shrewd eyes, watched the screen carefully where I stood in the snow, begging to be let in while Josh laughed off screen. After watching, she studied the paperwork for a few minutes, then looked up and announced her decision. Based on the evidence presented, the court grants a temporary restraining order for a period of 90 days. Defendants Joshua Coleman and Virginia Coleman are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of plaintiff Abigail Coleman, from contacting her in person, by telephone, email, or social media, or through third parties. I heard Virginia inhale sharply. Josh whispered something to his lawyer, but I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the judge, who continued, "The defendants are also prohibited from disseminating information defaming the plaintiff, giving interviews, or publishing material about her on social media or other media until the divorce proceedings are finalized." When the hearing was over, Morgan squeezed my hand. "This is a victory, Abby," she said. "The first of many." I nodded, unable to speak because of the lump in my throat. Yes, it was a victory. Small, temporary, but it was mine. The first step on thin ice that didn't crack beneath me. Exactly 1 year. 365 days since that frosty January evening when I stood barefoot in the snow. Sometimes this year seems longer than my entire previous life. Sometimes it's a brief moment between the past I've lost and the future I'm still learning to envision. The divorce finalized 4 months ago. In the final judgment, Judge Eleanor Pierce, the same judge who granted me my first restraining order, found Josh's video to be clear evidence of emotional and psychological abuse. Josh tried to challenge the ruling, hired an expensive big city lawyer. But even he couldn't explain how a therapeutic exercise could involve filming a person's suffering while laughing off screen. Virginia did not attend the final session. As Josh told her attorney, she was too upset by her sister-in-law's betrayal to see her. I didn't feel triumph at their defeat, only relief and fatigue, like I'd run a marathon and finally crossed the finish line. Morgan hugged me after the decision was announced. "You're free," she said, "legally and morally. No one can control you anymore. Free." It was a strange feeling after so many years of addiction, sometimes frightening, sometimes intoxicating, but always mine. A lot has changed this year. Samantha, my boss at the medical center, offered me a promotion to administrative manager. I supervise 3 staff members, create schedules, oversee purchasing, and do the bookkeeping. It's more responsibility than I've ever had before. And to be honest, sometimes I still question whether I'm doing a good job. You're doing great, Samantha says every time she notices my uncertainty. Just give yourself time to believe it. 3 months ago, I moved out of the crisis center and into a small studio apartment near work. It's nothing fancy, a kitchenette, a sofa bed, a tiny bathroom. But this is the first place that is completely mine. Every single thing here is chosen by me. Every inch of space is organized to my liking. The first night in my new apartment, I couldn't sleep. It was too strange to be all alone. 5 years of living with Josh, then months in a crisis center among other women. I was used to silence, to not having someone else's breath next to me. I put on some quiet, peaceful music, and sat up until dawn, with my arms wrapped around my knees, savoring the strange, new feeling of belonging. Little by little, I'm reestablishing old friendships. Cindy, my former coworker, who had become estranged at the beginning of the scandal, found me after Marcus's article was published. "I'm sorry," she said when I met her. "I acted like a coward, like a bad friend. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't okay, but I said I understood, that I forgive, that I wanted to try to start over. Now we see each other every 2 weeks. We drink coffee, go to the movies, talk about everything in the world. And slowly, the ease that we had before Josh is returning. We've made some new friends, too. Rachel from the crisis center, colleagues from work, women from the support group. I'm relearning how to communicate, how to trust, how to open up. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes I feel like a kid taking his first steps. But each time it gets easier. Every Saturday, I return to New Beginnings. Not as a resident, but as a volunteer. I help with paperwork, with organizing events, sometimes just talking to the newcomers. With those who have just taken that terrible decisive step of leaving their abuser. You inspire them, Diane, our therapist, once said. When they see that you were able to start a new life, they start to believe they can too. I don't feel inspired. I don't feel strong. But if my experience can help even one woman believe in herself, then it wasn't all for nothing. Therapy still has an important place in my life. I now see Carol, a private psychologist specializing in trauma. Once a week on Tuesdays, we talk about my fears, my insecurities, the guilt that sometimes returns. Emotional abuse leaves scars that you can't see on the outside, Carol says. But they heal if they are properly cared for. I'm learning to take care of myself, learning to recognize the signs of anxiety, to not let panic overwhelm me, learning to say no when I want to say no, not when it's expected of me. I'm learning to trust my feelings, my desires, my decisions, and I'm also learning to trust others. That's probably the hardest part. After Josh's betrayal, after almost everyone around me turned their backs on me in a difficult moment, it's hard to believe that someone could just want what's best for me. No ulterior motives, no manipulation, no control. I met Kyle 2 months after the final divorce hearing. My feet, though outwardly healed, were still causing problems. Frequent tingling, numbness in my toes after long walks. Samantha referred me to a physical therapist, a specialist in frostbite rehabilitation. Kyle Foster turned out to be a man in his mid-30s, with attentive brown eyes and a soft voice. At our first meeting, he spent a long time asking me about my injury, how much time I'd spent out in the cold, and how I was feeling now. Not a single gesture, not a single word expressed condemnation or pity. Only professional interest and desire to help. Frostbite often leaves long-term consequences, he explained. But the right therapy can make a big difference. We started meeting twice a week. Massage, special exercises, physical therapy. Gradually, I began to notice improvements. The pain decreased, the numbness was almost gone. But more importantly, I began to trust his hands, his words, his presence. After the 6th or 7th appointment, Kyle offered to have coffee after the session. I agreed, even though everything inside was clenched with anxiety. We sat in a small coffee shop across the street from his clinic, and the conversation suddenly flowed easily. He talked about his work, the patients he had helped, his dog, his love of mountain hiking. I talked about working at the medical center, volunteering, the new apartment. Not a word about Josh, the video, the divorce. Though I was sure he knew, my story had become quite famous in our town. Then there were other coffees, dinner at an Italian restaurant, a walk in the park with his golden retriever buddy. I loved hanging out with Kyle. I loved the way he listened, the way he laughed, the way he looked. There was definitely an affection developing between us. But every time our relationship could have gone to the next level, I backed off. "I need time," I said one day, when he lightly touched my hand over a table at a coffee shop. "I'm still learning to be me, alone." He didn't take offense, didn't push, didn't try to convince. Just nodded and took his hand away. "I understand," he said. "And I'm in no hurry. I value my newfound independence. I appreciate being able to make my own decisions without looking at other people's opinions. I'm not ready to give that up for a new relationship, no matter how promising it seems. Maybe later, when the roots I'm growing now are stronger. The nightmares still come. Not as often as they used to, but they are there. I wake up in a cold sweat, with my heart pounding. In the nightmares, I'm standing in the snow again, but now I can't move. I can't scream. I can only watch Josh and Virginia laugh, pointing their fingers at me. Carol taught me the grounding technique. When I wake up from a nightmare, I turn on the lamp, feel the bed, the walls, my hands, my feet. Remind myself where I am, that I'm safe, that what happened is in the past. Trauma doesn't go away completely, Carol says. We just learn to live with it and not let it control our lives. That's the whole point, learning to live with what happened without letting the past define the present and the future. I can't change the fact that I was in an abusive relationship for 5 years. I can't erase the day I stood in the snow begging for mercy. But I can decide what to do next, who to be, how to live. Today, on the anniversary of that day, I decided to go back there, to Virginia's house. Not alone. Laura came with me, and Helen too. They waited in the car as I walked up the familiar driveway, to the spot where I'd stood a year ago. Snow covered the ground as it had then, but this time I was wearing warm boots, wool socks, and a down coat. I stopped at the same spot. I closed my eyes. I remembered the pain, the humiliation, the fear. I let those feelings pass through me, not fighting them, not denying them, just acknowledging their existence. And then I pulled a paper lantern out of my bag. The kind you launch into the sky, lighting a small candle inside. I'd prepared it ahead of time, written on the paper cover all the words Josh and Virginia had used to make me doubt myself. Ungrateful, unstable, not good enough, incompetent, worthless. I lit the candle inside the flashlight. Warm air began to fill it, spreading the paper walls. When the lantern stretched, ready to take flight, I unclenched my fingers. It rose into the air, slowly, tentatively at first, then faster and more confidently. I watched him grow smaller and smaller in the winter sky, taking with him all those words, all those labels that no longer defined me. Laura came over and put her arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I answered. And for the first time in a long time, it was the truth. Not the full, absolute truth. I'm not fully healed, not fully recovered. But I'm moving in the right direction. I'm finding my way. I'm growing new roots, not in someone else's soil like before, but in my own. We walked back to the car where Helen was waiting. She smiled when she saw my flashlight in the sky. "It's beautiful," she said, "like a symbol of freedom. A reminder," I corrected, "of what I'd been through, and that I'd survived." Virginia's house was behind us as we drove away. I didn't look back. I don't need to. I know it's there. I know what happened in it. That part of my story isn't going anywhere. But it's just a chapter, not the whole book. And now it's up to me to decide what the next pages will say. I look ahead, at the road ahead, my path, with scars that are slowly healing, with memories that are slowly losing their sharpness, with new roots that grow stronger every day. I don't know where this path will lead me, but I know I'm walking it with my own feet, with my own step, at my own pace. And that's enough, more than enough.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.